I'm going to call the meeting to order. Oops. Sorry. Okay, I'm going to call this meeting to order for City of Independence Historic Preservation. Can we have a roll call, please? Here.
Commissioner Barry.
Here.
Commissioner Boisvert.
Here.
Commissioner Devane.
Here.
Commissioner Flores.
Here.
And Commissioner Young.
Here. Okay, we're up to the staff reports.
Minutes? Oh, sorry. I'm looking at the wrong thing, sorry.
Staff reports.
The next item is visitor public comments, but the only two speaker cards I hear for the application. Unfinished business? Okay, we're up to the application. I now open the public hearing on application for certificate of appropriateness, file number CA-2023-02. My name is Kurt Tidmore. I am the chairperson for this hearing. The hearing will be conducted in accordance with the Independence Development Code and State Law ORS 197.763. Specifically, the staff will first present the staff report and recommendation. The applicant will then have an opportunity to present the proposal and address any issues raised by the staff report and recommendation. For public testimony, I will first ask to hear from people who would like to speak in favor of the proposal. I will then ask to hear from people who have neutral comments or questions about the proposal, neither for nor against. Finally, those in opposition to the proposal will have an opportunity to present testimony. City staff may then present additional material and recommendations based on the testimony. The applicant will be given the opportunity to have the last word. After each presentation, I will ask for questions from the commission. If you intend to present oral testimony, please fill out a request to speak from the speak form located at the city recorder's station. We are recording this hearing, so please also clearly state your name and city of residence when you're called to speak. This will help in preparing accurate written minutes of the hearing and also assist with mailing copies of the decision to all interested parties. If you have written testimony or other evidence to submit, please give it to the staff so it can be entered into the record. The commission is required to disclose any conflicts of interest and ex parte contacts that we have had with the proposal or applicant. That is, whether we have any financial or other personal interest in the proposal, and whether we have spoken with anybody about the proposal outside this hearing. Also, commissioners may only participate if they can do so without undue bias, either for or against the application. Do any commissioners wish to make a disclosure? Are there any challenges from the audience as conflicts of interest, ex parte contacts, or bias related to any member of the commission? State law requires me to tell you a number of things at the beginning of the hearing. First, the applicable substantive criteria that apply to this application are contained in the written staff report and will be identified and discussed in the oral staff report. Secondly, your testimony, arguments, and evidence must be directed toward these criteria or other criteria in the comprehensive plan or development code that you believe apply to this application. Referring to ORS 197.753 5B. Third, failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the decision maker or other people an opportunity to respond may preclude an appeal of the decision of this application based on that issue. Finally, to the applicant, failure to raise constitutional or other issues relating to proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow the city to respond to this issue precludes an action for damages in circuit court. We will now hear the staff report.
Perfect. Hi there, everybody. My name is Fred Evander. I'm the city planner here at the City of Independence, and it's my pleasure to present this application. This application seeks to change the siding at the building at 435 South 5th Street. The building is a historic building built in 1936. It is a secondary contributing structure in the district according to the 1989 survey of the district, and it was eligible contributing according to the 2012 resurvey. What this application seeks to do is to change the existing siding, which we will see some examples of later on when the applicant presents, to something that's a cementitious siding, essentially a hardy plank sort of siding. Right now, the siding that's on the building is questionable about whether it's, well, it's pretty clear that it's not the original siding on the building, but it's not clear if the siding was added before or after the 1989 designation document. That designation document was written largely in the early 80s, and what the applicant has said is that some neighbors have stopped by and said that they have memories of the siding changing on the building during the Iran hostage crisis. So the late 70s, essentially. So was the siding on the building when the narrative was written, or was it not on the building? It's not exactly clear. What we do know is that the 1989 designation document calls out a narrow shiplap siding. We don't know exactly whether that is the siding that's on it right now, which ranges from slightly over 4.5 to 5 inches, and the applicant has said that there's some places that are even thicker. Or we don't know if it was a different type of siding. We do know that there are some buildings in the historic district that have very small reveals in their siding. So whether the original siding was one of those smaller reveals or not, we're not exactly certain. Also, further complicating the situation is there is a matching building, and Karen, if you would show the staff report, page 4 of the agenda packet, you will see that there is a matching building in town. It's actually one of the buildings owned by Paul Ritter, and you can see that those two buildings are pert near the same. What you will note, you can't really see it when we're looking at it on this, perhaps if you could zoom in a little bit, is the siding on that building is actually different than the siding. So you can see that's the siding on the building right now. Scroll down to the next one. You can see this is one of those cedar sidings with sort of the groove in it that we see very regularly within the district. Whether something like that was originally on the building, we don't know. Why do I go through all of this? Is because based on the historic documentation, I don't believe that we can determine what siding was on the building first. And what our standards call out is you're not supposed to essentially put something on to try and achieve a historic character that was never there, right? You're not supposed to do fake restoration. And since we don't know exactly what the siding was, I think it makes it difficult to sort of try and approximate the siding. What we do see on the building that are remnants of sort of, for sure, some of that historic character, or you can see some of the trim around the windows, the sill details, as well as some of the fascia are very similar to what you see on the matching building below, if you'll scroll down to that. So based on that, staff's recommendation is that you approve, essentially I have 3 conditions that I suggest in the staff report, and I should just call those out real quick. You'll note those on page 8 of the staff report, 8 of the packet. The applicant shall document the dimensions and characteristics of the fascia board, window trim, and sill, and match all replacement work to that character. Condition 2, the applicant shall use as much of the existing siding as possible on the front of the building, provided that an alternative may be used if a sufficient amount of siding without dry rot is not able to cover the elevation. And condition 3, siding used on the sides of the building shall match the reveal of the siding on the front of the building and shall not include a faux wood grain pattern. With those 3 conditions, staff feels comfortable with this application. I can say I have been inside the building. I have looked at the building a fair amount, and it is very evident that water has been getting into the building. There is a lot of evidence of moisture on the inside of the building, and even looking at some of the images, you can see that over time the building just hasn't been kept up to let essentially a lot of moisture into the building. The goal of this project by the applicant is essentially to remake the building watertight, and then to have it look as similar as possible as to how it currently looks. Are there any questions of me?
We're good. So we can move on. Is the applicant going to,
Yep, he's,
Mr. Goodrich? Welcome.
I push the middle? Oh, it's already on. I can hear myself. Great. Well, Mr. Chairperson, Commission, Fred, thank you all for your efforts on our behalf. Unfortunately, my wife and I haven't been to Independence for about 12 years. This home was a rental for us for a very long time. We were up in September and we were absolutely horrified by the condition we found it in. It certainly wasn't what we left it in. So we previously restored a historical home in New Almaden, California about 25 years ago, and we wanted to do the same thing here. And it's been wonderful working with Fred to get an idea of what the character was, some of the research of what the house used to look like. And our neighbor behind us, Pete, he passed away in March. Pete and I would chat all the time, and he's like, you know, Eric, when you were on Contra, when that whole prisoner thing was going on, I knew the people that lived there, and she used to be a police officer here, Janet Davidson, I think her name was, and she had redone the whole inside and the outside of the house, according to Pete. So he told me it wasn't original. He mentioned the circles or balls that Fred had mentioned were in the report, but we don't know what those look like either. So our intent is to take off the siding, replace it with a cement hardy backer with a similar reveal. The reveal on the back of the house is like 6 3/4 to 7 inches. The sides are 4 to 5, and the front is 4 to 5.5. So we're going to find something that's in that range to make it work. We want to use the smooth plank, and we want it to look as much as it can like the houses around us. The house immediately to the north of us was built in 1937. It's a smooth plank with a 7-inch reveal. Several of the houses across the street are the same, so we want to make it look good. And when we did the application, we thought, well, maybe we can save some of the original siding. That was our intent in talking with our contractor, but since then we now know that it's just nearly impossible. There's not enough siding. So I brought in some show and tells, and if I may approach, I can pass this along. This is median condition. One is from the front of the house and one is from the back.
Was this from the, did you get this off the bottom of your house, or where was this located? Do you have any-
Mid-range on both walls.
Okay.
Yeah, the bottoms are too far gone. I couldn't really bring them in. And also I'd like to share with you, these are 2 of the corner pieces from a couple of different places in the house. And as you can see on the back of them, there's 2 skews. And I did a little homework, and the skews came out in 1976. So. So unfortunately, in getting into the house, and a lot of the lath and plaster is damaged due to the moisture, so we removed pretty much 4 feet down, mid-wall down to the sill. And there's so much moisture damage, we're gonna have to replace a lot of the inside of the walls. But our intent is to keep all of the window casing, the door trim, the uniqueness to the outside of the house, the sills, everything the same. A lot of the fascia boards, believe it or not, are pretty good. So we're gonna keep those, and then everything else we'll replace with wood as far as the sills and the siding goes. And then the siding itself will be the HardieBacker.
What about your windows?
The windows were replaced prior to our buying it in 1995, and they're vinyl, and they're in good condition, and they'll stay.
I have a question. How do you intend to treat the corners where these were?
Great question, Mr. Chairperson. And I had anticipated that. Our insurance agent and the contractor don't particularly care for that because of the moisture. So they're recommending, if you can imagine, this is the corner of the building, a reveal that looks like this.
That's what would have been there.
You can see something similar on that matching house where it's that sort of treatment.
And I thank Fred for that advice too, because that's what he said.
We probably had some water penetration with corners like that. Okay. Anybody else have any questions for the applicant? Well, thank you.
Thank you very much.
We have a couple of speakers who want to speak in favor. The first one is it Daniel Tom?
Hi, Mr. Chairperson, and I think I live in the house directly north of Eric, so that house Eric was referring to with the 7-inch reveal. My wife and I moved in about a year ago, and I would just like to speak in favor of this. I don't have a ton to offer that Eric hasn't already added, but what Eric is proposing would match my home and a lot of homes in the area. I think it would look really good to the neighborhood. I've been in Eric's house 3 different times over the past couple of weeks, and I've seen his attention to detail and his concern even on the inside about preserving the historic nature of the home. And so I have no concerns at all that Eric will see this through and to the utmost respect for the building historicity. The only thing I would add to the staff recommendation, condition number 2 on preserving the original. I've been over there a couple times as well and looked at the siding, and I would just recommend that you allow Eric to not be tethered to having to keep the original in the front. So giving him a little bit of leeway there to use the appropriate material, even if there's not enough salvageable material to use on the front. That's the only thing I would add. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Reader?
Folks, Paul Ryder, and I own the little red house that he used for a sample. And I know this house very well. I took care of the lady back in the early 80s until she passed away, Nell Wood, and she lived there probably for 50 years. But at that time, that siding was in poor condition. The paint was peeling badly on it. Bud Lusk was a guy around here. He repainted it, but it just never did look good. HardiePlank siding, it will, I would say, complement that house. It'll make it look a lot cleaner, and it holds the paint well, which that old siding, even if you try cleaning it up and things, it will not hold the paint on there. So I'm in favor. I do have some of that siding, probably enough to do part of the front if you decide to keep it that way, that I would donate for that house, because my house that I live in now, the Pink House Cafe, and the house I restored up on Monmouth and 9th Street is the same siding there. So I do have some that I have cleaned up and things that could be used, but I would go with the hardy plank all the way around. That would be my suggestion for that house too. So I'm in favor for that, okay?
Thank you for your time. So we don't have any more speakers, either neutral or against. Do you have any additional?
I do not.
I have one last question for you, though. I'm sorry. So it sounds like from the last speaker that there's not enough siding to do the front even. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so we're looking at basically hardy plank all around.
That's correct.
Okay. Okay. Are there any other questions from commissioners?
Darn thing. Is that your feeling, Fred? I mean,
I mean, I have been out there. I have, as he's been revealing the siding, more and more of it. I mean, looking at some of this, I mean, it is a very thin siding. There's no doubt about it. So yeah, I mean, yeah, I think either way, or any way, essentially, is a fine way to go.
I just get the feeling that if you use whatever's left over, whatever you can find from the back or the sides or whatever to put on the front, it's used, it's brittle, it's not gonna hold up from very long. So I think it's better just to go around.
I'm sorry, but I'm going to ask you one more question that just came to mind.
Absolutely, it's fine. I'm getting plenty of exercise already.
What is the cost differential between hardy plank and, say, cedar?
Cedar's about 5 times as much.
Okay. Do you know how much you'll be spending on hardy plank all around?
I haven't, I know our budget's around 20,000 for the exterior siding.
Okay.
It could go higher, but that's a ballpark.
Fair enough. Thank you very much. If the commissioners don't have any further questions and there are no objections, I would like to close the hearing. If no objections, the hearing and record is closed. Okay, we're in our deliberation phase.
I would also agree that just having the hardy plank all around, it would also match better, you know, instead of trying to match up different deals. And like Rebecca said, you know, using something that's already old and brittle seems like a
Well,
problem.
if you have any heartburns about hardy plank, keep in mind it was produced since the late 1880s. So it's not like it's a new product. It's been around. Sure, it'd be nice to put cedar. That's what would have been up there. But I can also say I've done some projects lately, not on the house, where I thought I was going to get cedar until I went down to buy it. So I can certainly understand that.
Yeah, I'd much rather the home was saved with hardy plank than allowed to just disintegrate like we've seen a couple houses around here lately do. So sure, original siding's great, but I'd rather we save the entire home than deal with trying to replicate cedar or something that's less hardy, especially given the fact that we live in an area with weather. It's June, we had hail.
Well, it sounds like we're all kind of in the same place here on this one. The chair would entertain a motion at this point.
So I would move that we could strike condition number 2.
And then add that to that. I mean, you want to hand the suggested motion?
As condition 2 is written, it's intentionally written,
It was-
recognizing the fact that.
It had
there
no
might-
vagueness, you know.
Yeah, that there might not be enough citing to do that.
John,
So then we would just make the motion to approve it as written.
and John was in the, you want to read that, John?
No, I think I hadn't said that. I agree.
Right, there's a suggested motion on that sheet I just handed you. There's a suggested language for the motion on that sheet.
Well, I move to approve the certificate of appropriateness application file number CA 2023-02, adopting findings, conditions, and staff recommendations as provided in the staff report. And striking condition 2 is not necessary.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? It's unanimous. I wish you luck on your project.
Please bring the samples in.
Figured our copy well. Are we done?
I think we're pretty much done unless,
I have something.
okay,
Are we ready for other discussions?
We are.
Okay. Last week, that darn thing, last week, Commissioner Devane and I attended a planning commission meeting here, and it was about the light on 7th Street in Monmouth. And one of our concerns was that it's in the historic area, especially the home at 675 Monmouth Street, and also the large house right across the street from it, which I don't know what the address is on that. And just as heads up, I think that we need to make sure that we look at this house, these two homes, because at this time, the Planning Commission accepted an agreement that they go ahead with the plans to put in a roundabout or a stop light, a red light, green light, stop light. And I think it would put I think it would be difficult for to put that in that area without damaging some of the property.
This is at the intersection of 7th and Monmouth,
Yes,
where the white Victorian that they're.
Yes.
right now.
yes,
And
and,
then the mayor's house.
yes, yes. So just heads up, and if you have anything to say, if not, I really would like to hear from Fred, because he has done a very nice job on checking about the cost and such. And I'd like to have him share it with us. If not tonight, maybe he can.
right, so I mean, just a little context, so subdivision is going down, was proposed down 7th Street. What their traffic analysis said was they needed a light at 7th and Monmouth. What the hearing really focused on was then the question of what proportion of the light they're responsible for, portion of that cost. Part of my argument was this is not a priority of the city. This would benefit a limited number of properties, and therefore they should be responsible for carrying a large proportion of that cost. I had specifically pointed to things like our transportation system plan, which do not call for a light there, but instead call for improved street connectivity through the community. Based on the arguments, the applicant argued something different, that because of the timing and because some of the other street connections were not present at this time, that the light was therefore essential. They also presented a different method of calculating how much traffic would go to that intersection based on the development. And in the grand scheme of things, the Planning Commission went with their proportion and did not see an option to approve of the subdivision in any other way than with the traffic light. And so, so that's essentially how that discussion went. It wasn't, I mean, the hearing wasn't about a traffic light. The hearing was about a subdivision that required a traffic light to essentially address the traffic impacts that are associated with the development. So in short, that's the story of it. It was, I don't know, 3-hour meeting.
So it sounds like nothing's gonna happen? Did they approve it? Okay, so, I'm sorry, I misunderstood what you're saying. My question would be, there's no plans to expand the right-of-way there, is there? Onto the,
So as part of any sort of, as part of any traffic improvement there, they're gonna have to do what's called an intersection control evaluation, which is through ODOT. And that intersection control evaluation determines whether it's a traffic signal or a roundabout, or whether it's a turn lane. That evaluation will essentially describe exactly what the improvement is. I'll say none of us want that to expand the right of way. None of us wants to get involved in taking right of way or.
I think that's the only thing that probably the Historic Preservation Commission would have. Yeah, right, and that's an important thing, and I'm glad to hear that that's not an option that anybody's looking at seriously.
Could I say something?
Absolutely.
One of the things that was very clear, two things very clear, I'm sorry.
Two things very clear. One, that Fred and the planning group with him had a percentage of, what was it, SDC costs of 37% of this fictional light. The developer came in at 8%, 6%. The Planning Commission approved the developer 6% to pay for this traffic light. In other words, the rest of us will pay for the development. The other thing is, this is 3 years maybe in getting the light, but they're going to go ahead and build the houses starting as soon as it goes through City Council's approval. That's going to be, if anybody's gone over to those houses, okay, it's on Cedar as you go all the way out. Those houses go for $500,000. There's just a recent fourplex that was sold for $1.5 million. Those are the kinds of things that developer wants to build out there.
So that's not exactly true. It's not going to be, it's going to be new. I mean, my argument, it's going to be new to, it's likely going to be SDCs paying for those, which are called system development charges, that are going to pay for.
Hang on just a second, Fred.
Those are going to be paid for by new development. Part of my argument was not all new development benefits from that light. In fact, there's some new developments that have no need of that light, which was why our transportation system plan called specifically for different improvements there. And so the analogy that I tried to use and I don't want to relitigate. But I tried to essentially say, we have a shopping list right now, and if our shopping list costs a certain amount, adding another project to it is going to increase the overall amount for the shopping list. And so that does then get spread to other projects.
Before we get further into this topic, let me remind everyone, and I have your concerns too, but this is not the appropriate venue to speak to budget items, to planning. The only thing that we would be looking at is how it impacts historic properties. And the primary question, it sounds like we're free and clear that they don't want to expand the right of way. I'm sure that at that point, we would have a lot to say if they did. And if you personally have heartburn with the proposed method or division of payment, that's a thing as a private citizen you should be taking to planning and city council. But it's really not, this is not the forum to be discussing that.
This is.
Well, no, we just wanted to bring this as a heads up, that it's probably maybe gonna happen sometime in the future.
Well, I'm glad you did, because for the first question that popped in my mind, are they talking about expanding the right of way? And I'm gonna be paying very close attention every time that topic comes up, because if they talk about expanding the right of way, that's when you'll see me jumping up and down like a crazy person.
Oh, good. Okay.
And this is what we want. This is exactly what we want. We want people to jump up and down like a crazy person.
Right. And we also, Fred, you really did a great job. I'm sorry that you got thrown under the bus. I'm really, really sorry. You know, here's this guy that says, okay, developer, you can pay 37% and, you know,
We have a question in the audience.
oh,
Yes.
You'll need to fill out a speaker card, please. Go ahead.
My name is Ken Larson. I reside at 614 South Main Street. One of the things that I was perplexed by, and also listening to the audience when the discussion took place, and I'd like some clarification from Fred if possible. I understood as the conversation went away from the proportionate sharing, it was going to be up to ODOT as to whether it went into a roundabout or whether it was going to be a traffic light, because the survey said that one way with a traffic light, it was going to back up 4 blocks to 4th Street and 4 blocks to the north with just the timing of a regular traffic light. And I could see the light bulbs coming on and heard some other conversations after the meeting about how the historical district is going to be impacted if the state comes back and says, no, we prefer to have a roundabout. That's
So you're talking about the expansion of the right of way if they have put a roundabout.
correct.
Yeah, I'm gonna be watching that closely as well now. Thank you.
but the thing is, it's tied, but it's not gonna happen for 3 years. But they're gonna start building as soon as they get.
Well,
That in and of itself is not quite true
Oh,
as
okay.
well. But I can.
And again, that's off topic for the commission.
Okay, all right, sorry.
Are there any other new items that need to be brought up?
I have a question.
Yes, go
Did
ahead.
we, did I miss a meeting or something where we okayed a balcony upstairs on 413 South Main to replace windows that were there?
413 South Main is a non-contributing historic structure, so that under the existing code is my purview. That's how it got written. The building, if you look at, that's the black one, right down here on the right-hand side of the street.
Can you pull up, so we know what we're talking about?
Oh, the one right.
If
on
you
the
look at the
corner.
building itself, it's been drastically modified from what it originally was. And not just from the current landowner, but previously as well. And so it's a non-contributing historic structure. And so they did apply for appropriateness review. I did do that staff level appropriateness review.
Cool.
There we go.
Oh, that's terrible.
Well, upstairs, the window there now is
So
doors.
what did they do that's changed?
The windows up there are gone.
Can you drop can you have the little guy walk in straight view, Karen?
I don't know, can
The little guy. What little guy?
This
I think he is there.
Oh, all right.
Somebody had to do it.
Oh, so it's a cafe?
It is now.
That's what it
It
said.
just opened
Yeah.
in the last week or so.
So this is what the building used to look like. And you can tell, based on a number of things, that these windows are not original.
Mhm.
This porch right here had been added. The building was probably shaped like this, and so this was an addition. At a certain point, right, you could almost tell that it was symmetrical like this, for the big porch this way. And so the whole thing had been modified pretty significantly. And as a result of that, that's why it was not contributing historic structure. It's an old building, it's just a lot of the historic character is gone.
So much good.
Okay.
You know, and around the back of that building, down on the first floor, is a glass blowing studio.
They melt glass, they don't.
Well, I'm sorry, okay.
Is there anything else? Nothing? We're adjourned.
Okay.